Hi, welcome to In a Pickle Knitting. My name is Donna and this is Vlogtober day 11. So today's October 11th, 2018. I'm coming to you from Manassas, Virginia with a little short seasonal, or this particular book is seasonal, but it can be used any time of the year, and then a little craft at the end. So let's get started. Our book today is called The Secret Life of Squirrels, and it's by Nancy Rose. Nancy Rose is the photographer, and she is also the one who designs all of her little scenes for her squirrel. Mr. Peanut is her main actor, but she does have other actors who play parts from time to time in her different photographs. This book is so cute. Kids love it because it is a real squirrel, but he is set like he lives in a home. Mr. Squirrel does get lonely, and he invites his cousin to come and visit, and he does, and they go on their little adventures in the story. So I'll show you a few of the pictures so you can get an idea. You see Mr. Peanuts there? He's got his vacuum cleaner out. So she makes all of these little miniature things, and she sets them up on her deck. And at first she just had them on the railing, and then she actually made a wider platform from wood and has some wire in the background so she can prop up her background scenes, and she clips those to the wire, and then she uses peanuts to attract the squirrels, and their curiosity brings them, and she works really hard and takes lots and lots of pictures to get just the right shot. She said that sometimes it'll sit all weekend and she doesn't get any good pictures out of it, and other times it happens rather quickly. So that's just from the very beginning, The Secret Life of Squirrels. And there is the star, Mr. Peanuts. And those are the same type squirrels that we have in our yard. They're a gray squirrel, I believe. And here he is doing some grilling. Look at that little grill she made out of foil pans and popsicle sticks. I love miniature things, and I love when somebody takes something simple and ordinary and turns it into something that, you know, it looks realistic. Who would think those little baking pans that you make miniature loaves in would end up being a barbecue grill? It's just enchanting. Here's when he writes off a little letter to his cousin to get him to come and visit, and you know, he has to mail the letter. Now you tell me how she got that picture. I cannot even imagine. So this is a book that children would really enjoy. I enjoy it, I think, as much as the kids do, so I think it's enjoyed by adults as well. And what is another nice feature is at the very end, she has a question and answer page, which is where I learned some of the information that I shared with you. And they also give 10 tips for photographing wildlife, so that's a nice little feature. And she tells you about a website that Secret Life of Squirrels has. She also says this all started because of a photograph that she posted on Flickr. She'd been photographing lots of things for a long time, and she posted this one, and it actually had a prop in it, and it was so well received it ended up leading to this book. So that I really like that part too. So now it's time to segue into our crafting time. So I'm going to pause right here, and we'll be back with our craft. Our little craft for today is going to be making this maple leaf quilt block. Now, this quilt block could be turned into a quilt, a lap quilt, a table runner, which is my plan, or even just a pillow. You would just have to add some sashing or borders to the edges or connect a bunch together. I decided to make mine using different colors in the leaf itself. You can also choose to do all of those triangles and squares and the stem in the same color. And then you could do other blocks in different colors, or do an entire quilt out of the exact, just two different colors. But since I decided I wanted this multicolored leaf, I decided that I would need to use 8 different fabrics for each block. So that changes the directions a little bit. The way I'm going to give them is with instruction that you will end up with 2 blocks, because in the process of making these half square triangles, you end up with 2 sets. So I will also give you the measurements and numbers to cut so that you can have 2 of everything to make 2 different blocks. If you're only making 1 block, then you can change all of this around. But I'm not going to go into directions for doing both ways. So let's get to what we're going to need to cut out first from our fabrics. To make 2 quilt squares that have multicolored leaves, you're going to need to cut 4 different fabrics from your leaf fabric. These squares will be 3 7/8 by 3 7/8. You will also need to cut 4 from your background fabric that are 3 7/8 inches. So you'll need a total of 8 of this 3 7/8 inch size. You will also need to cut from your leaf fabric 8 3.5 inch squares, and 6 of these will be used for one purpose, and 2 of them will be used for the stem. So that's 6 3.5 inch and 2 3.5 inch from your leaf fabric. And then you need to cut 2 3.5 inch squares from your background, 4 3-inch squares from your background fabric. So that will give you all of your squares all of your pieces that you need to make 2 squares. Now that we've cut, let's get started by making these half square triangles. And you'll see we need 1, 2, 3, 4 half square triangles per quilt square. So we're going to, in total, get 8 of them. But what's interesting is that when you make 1 set, you end up with 2. So let's see how we do that. We're going to take a leaf color and a background color. We're going to put them right sides together, like so, and we are going to draw a line. Actually, 2 lines is one way we can do it, but we can either draw 1 line from the diagonal to the other end of the diagonal right here, and what you'll do is stitch a 1/4 inch away from that line. However, I prefer to do it where I have this marker, this cutting tool, and I line up my diagonal with the center of it and trace either side, both sides. And that gives me an actual stitching line that I'm going to trace. I'm sorry, that gives you a stitching line that you're going to stitch on. So you're going to do 2 rows of stitching here, and you're going to do that with all of your pieces here. Layering right sides together, a leaf color with a background color, whatever you're using for your background color. So you'll do that to all 4 of these and go do 2 stitching lines on each one and come back. Now on all 4 of these squares, you're going to cut from the one corner to the other, which gives a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then go and press these seams to the dark side. Now cut from one corner to the other, which will give a 1/4 inch on either side from the seams that you just sewed in, and we are going to open them, and from the wrong side press towards the dark side. Trim off these little dog ears. And repeat with all of your sets. Now we have 2 sets of these half square triangles that we're going to be using for our leaf. The next thing we have to piece is the stem. To create your stem, you need 3 pieces. You need a leaf colored 3.5 inch square and 2 background color 3-inch squares. And we're going to be drawing a diagonal line on the wrong side of both of the background squares. So if you turn those over and just draw a line from one corner to the other, a diagonal line. Okay, now that we have our diagonal line, we're going to use one background piece and our one leaf piece and put them right sides together. And we're going to match them up in a corner. Now we have different size pieces, so they don't fit one right over the other. This is correct. And we are going to go to the machine and sew a seam line along that diagonal line that you drew on the smaller background square. Now we're going to cut off the part of this package here that we don't need, and we're going to put our ruler along the seam line, and we want to cut 1/4 inch away from the seam line to trim off these two little triangles, which can go in the scrap bag or into the trash. You have a piece that looks like this. We want to go over and iron it with pressing the seam to the dark side and come back. So we have 1/2 of our stem piece complete. You're going to take the other 3-inch square out of the background color and line it up in the opposite corner. Once again, go over and stitch on that diagonal line that you drew. So we're going to do the same thing with this seam. We want to cut off this excess portion. So I'm going to line up my 1/4 inch with the seam line, trim that off. And again, this is for the scrap bag, and we need to go and press towards the dark side. So now we have our corner piece, which has our stem on it, and if you look at the other side, you'll see that we have the seam allowances pressed towards this darker stem color. So now we're ready to set up our quilt and decide how we'll sew our squares together. You'll need these pieces to put together our 9-block quilt square. We need our stem piece, we need our 4 half-square triangles, we need 3 3.5-inch squares that are from our leaf color, and 1 3.5-inch square that's from our background color. And our background color is going to go up at the top right, and then you're going to decide which leaf point piece that you'd like, and you'll want to set it up in that orientation. Find your next piece, and that's our first row. Our next row is going to have one of our half-square triangles in this orientation, then a leaf color, which might be a solid or something else. We can't do that one there. We'll have to do it this way. In fact, I might put that on the other side. Choose another color for the center. Just don't want those two to be touching each other. Our stem piece in the corner, and our final half-square triangle right here. I've got another set touching, but I don't really, in this case, see a way around that. So, because if I switched here, it's going to be the same thing. So, this is how we're going to sew it together. I'm going to start with my top row, and what I do is get 2 pins, and I pin the pieces together that need to be sewn together so that when I get to the machine, I don't get confused about what needs to be sewn to what. And I leave my pieces set up this way until I'm finished with the block. So that's the first thing I'm going to stitch, the top 3 squares. All right, my first strip is sewn together and pressed. And 2 things that I did not mention, but certainly should have, is that we are using a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all seams in this quilt square. And the other thing is that you really should use a very short stitch length while you're stitching your pieces together. You do not need to back stitch because stitches are overlocked with crossing seams, but you should use a really short seam stitch length. Okay, so we're going to do what we've done with that first one with that first row with our middle row, and that is to make sure that we've got our pieces pinned together so that we don't get over to the machine and stitch them together wrong. It's been known to happen. Now let's do the same pinning and stitching with our bottom row. We have our 3 strips, and so now we're going to sew the strips together. You're going to take the top strip and fold it down and pin so that you meet up your seams here, so that one's lying one direction and one the other. Sometimes you will have to go and repress if you've turned it the wrong direction. So we'll stitch along here. And now we'll take that bottom strip and flip it up, match the seams, and stitch along this line and press. Now we're ready to square up all of the edges and move on to the next step of whatever project you have in mind for your maple leaf quilt square.